I've been watching horror films for over 20 years, so I've seen a lot of hits and a lot of misses. These days, I'm kind of obsessed with found footage, and Butterfly Kisses is one of the most surprising hits I've seen in a while. I'm baffled that this movie is as underrated as it is, especially given its commentary on found footage and a wild cameo that we get in the film. Today, we'll be exploring Butterfly Kisses, why it's so genius, and why you need to go watch it immediately following this video. This will be spoiler-free though. The beauty of this film is that I can create a whole video talking about how amazing and genre bending it is without really spoiling anything, and you can still go into it with a fresh pair of eyes and a bit of hype behind it. If you're at all convinced after watching this video and want to watch Butterfly Kisses yourself, there will be a link in the description and the pinned comment to do so. Now, there is a certain aspect about this film that makes it a bit tragic, but we'll get to that a bit later on. Let's start with the basics. Butterfly Kisses came out in 2018. It's directed by Eric Christopher Myers, and it's about an ambitious filmmaker, Gavin, who discovers a box full of videotapes that were recorded 10 years previously by two film students who were filming a documentary uncovering the truth behind a local urban legend called Peeping Tom. Gavin wants to finish their project and release it to the world, so he is creating his own edit of these tapes, and he hires a documentary crew to chronicle his undertaking. As you can already tell, there are a lot of layers to this thing. Just right off the bat, this film caught me off guard. It is so good. It's filmed beautifully in two aspects. There's an eeriness to the original DV tapes from the students that are off-putting, and that's contrasted by these professionally filmed, well-composed interview sections for the documentary. The plot itself is intriguing and had me hooked the entire time. I remember pausing the movie at one point and giving a quiet audible, like, fuck yeah, when I realized there was still half an hour to go. I just didn't want it to end. This is a slow burn as we are slowly fed bits and pieces of the story in the form of the original tapes, and things slowly start to click. It's very much a thriller in that aspect, but there are like a handful of scenes that really carve in that horror aspect too. This movie is basically a deconstructing of the found footage genre, but what does that mean? To explain the genius of this film, we have to harken back to an interview that director Eric Christopher Myers did with Dread Central back in December of 2018. When asked what sparked his desire to write Butterfly Kisses, he states that shortly after his first film, Roulette, came out back in 2013, he saw a trailer for a new found footage film and began to pick at the idea of a found footage film in general. Like, what makes these films so terrifying, or at least the good ones, is we're supposed to believe that this is real footage that was actually found by someone. Footage depicting terrifying events and circumstances, and that they're revealing it to the world in its rawest form. Myers began asking the questions that have probably crossed your mind, at least subconsciously, while watching a found footage movie. What made the finder think the footage was real? Would anyone believe it in real life? What lengths did they have to go to in order for it to be released in theaters to the public? And he wanted to create a film that explored that very thought process. Myers also stars in the film as the director of the documentary crew making the documentary about Gavin's creation of this edit. So in the movie, Gavin is trying to convince people that this found footage these students captured is real, and he is met with extreme criticism and judgment. They all accuse him of faking the footage or adding special effects, this and that. And that's kind of the criticism that filmmakers would be met with today if they tried presenting their films as completely true footage. Now, there are exceptions to this. I'll be the first to admit that I thought Paranormal Activity and The Fourth Kind were real when they came out, and one of the main drivers behind the Blair Witch Project even, their marketing campaign was that the footage was real. So a lot of times it is plausible, especially to someone like me who initially just takes things at face value. All that to say, this is part of the genius, that it's analyzing found footage films while being a found footage film and also exploring this really interesting urban legend. So to explain Peeping Tom, the urban legend is basically if you go to these train tracks with this tunnel, if you stare at the end of the tunnel without blinking for an hour, then this creature, this figure, Peeping Tom, will emerge and show himself to you. And then every time you blink, he will be closer to you, and you can never unsee him. So every time you blink, he gets closer, eventually getting so close that he scares you to death. So yeah, pretty creepy when you think about it, but it's a pretty interesting plot line that they follow here. Peeping Tom is a fictitious legend created by the director, but it was so believable and utilized so well in the movie's viral marketing campaign that author Shelley Davies Wygant included it in her book Haunted Ellicott City as an actual local legend, and the director had to contact her to let her know it was fake. He was worried about her being upset by that, but she instead told him that it was just brilliant. So there's an amazing cameo in this movie. There's a cameo by Ed Sanchez, director of the Blair Witch Project.
Hi, let me introduce you. Gavin, this is Ed Sanchez, the king of the found footage, the director of the Blair Witch Project, who is calling to talk about your movie, Butterfly Kisses.
It wasn't even going to happen originally because the director basically thought there's no chance in hell that Ed Sanchez is going to give a fuck about my movie and want to be in it, but his producer convinced him to reach out and Sanchez agreed to it. Not only was he a cameo, but he also ended up producing the film and helped narrow down the film from 3 hours to its 91-minute runtime through feedback and positive criticism. There are a couple of other cameos in this. It also features cameos from an actual film critic, David Starrett, and a TV editor, and Andy Wardlaw, adding to the realism of the documentary that is being made about Gavin. And speaking of Gavin, I loved the performance of the lead actor, Seth Adam Kalik. He's great as a lead actor, so I was surprised to see he hasn't been in much else. He gives a very convincing performance as a filmmaker who becomes obsessed with this project, and he's got great charisma, but also kind of makes you want to punch his face sometimes. He holds this thing together and keeps me intrigued the entire time. I didn't really hate Gavin's character initially. I just saw afterwards when I was doing research that some people hated him, but if anything, there's a different character who I disliked even more, and it's one of the 2 initial film students who discovered Peeping Tom. One of them is this pretentious, stuck-up film student named Feldman. Just the name alone makes me cringe. Yeah, he sucked, but everyone else was pretty great. Some other criticisms I have for the film are that I wish they had explored Peeping Tom a bit more, and there's a big plot point surrounding that aspect that they could have gotten to a lot earlier in the film, but I can see how that would have made some of the movie pointless. In summary, Butterfly Kisses is a must-watch, especially for fans of found footage films. It's a documentary within a documentary and presents itself as many layers without losing itself in the details. It's a slow burn and uses very little gore. It's much more of an unraveling mystery, true crime type of vibe. You'll be on the edge of your seat just waiting for questions to be answered and to find out if that original footage is real or not. There is a post-credit scene, so make sure you stick around for that. It answers at least one glaring question I had when we got to the ending, and make sure to come back to this video after you watch Butterfly Kisses to let me know what you thought. Now, I let you know there is a certain aspect of this film that kind of takes it down a tragic road. Back in 2021, the director, Eric Christopher Myers, actually took his own life. I was excited to look up more info about him and research him, but quickly found that he is no longer with us, which is a very, very sad thing. It's not only about the movie, just from the little I've read about him and interviews he did, he seemed like a great guy who really loved film. I don't know what the landscape was like for this film when it first came out, but I hope that when it came out, he got some of the praise that he deserves for making such a great film. I'll link to an interview he did with Dread Central about Butterfly Kisses because it's some awesome insight from a great filmmaker. He also did an AMA on Reddit as well, just days before his death. I can tell he was a good person too because he mentioned his son in a few of his comments and basically said that he hopes to be able to put his son through college one day. And it takes a good man to be a good father, and at least from the very little I've seen of him, he seems like a good father. In that same interview he did with Dread Central, they asked him about his son who is on the autism spectrum and how that possibly influenced him or the film. He states that he was diagnosed just days after he finished the first draft of the film, and it completely changed him as a person, which is unsurprising. The diagnosis inspired him to focus less on his career path and more on his son's development and achievements. He says, even now when I watch Butterfly Kisses, all I remember during each scene is darting home after filming to work with him on his speech, his fine motor skills, and all the ways he was transforming right in front of me. In turn, I changed as well. Very tragic indeed, and yeah, I just hope wherever he is now, he's found peace and can see the recognition he's getting for his work. Sorry y'all, I didn't mean to get all sad on you there, but I thought it was important to mention his legacy while talking about his film, which I now love. If you've made it to this point of the video, thank you so much for sticking around and listening to me yap about this film. Make sure to go watch the movie if you haven't. Like I said, I'll have a link to do so in the description and in the pinned comment. If you've already seen the movie, I'd love to hear what you thought of it down below. Make sure to like the video and subscribe so we can keep talking about horror movies all year long. I've got a digital code to a horror film that I want to give away soon, so make sure you're subscribed to get a chance at winning that digital code. This has been the Nonstop Horror YouTube channel. Thanks for sticking around. I'll see you in the next one, and remember to embrace the fear all year long.